Thank you. Okay. So I want to welcome everybody who's listening live or who's listening afterwards on YouTube to session number 152 of Boston Women's Yeshiva Faith and Calm. And my husband, for his segment, he's going to be broadcasting from Washington, D.C., where he's in a hotel room at a conference, an Air Force conference. And I think we're going to keep it short, like we've been doing lately. So, Yeskel Shimon, I'm going to, you can start speaking and I will pin you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You pinned me?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, welcome to Faith and Cow 152. Nice here. Nice weather here. I don't know what your weather is, but here it's Washington D.C. The cherry blossoms have finished, but very pretty here. I was going to talk about, there's a double parsha this week, Achrei Mos and Kadoshi. And they're action-packed. There's just a lot of information in them. And I'm going to try and connect the two parshas. Achrei Mos starts out, and it's talking about what happened after the death of Aaron's two sons. It starts out with talking about how God gives the instructions to Aaron about how to do the service on Yom Kippur. And so it's a very lofty, very high spiritual idea. But of any parsha, it has a lot of contradictions in it because it talks about some stuff that's completely different. So I'm going to tell the joke that I heard sort of to illustrate this. So there was once these three very progressive rabbis were sitting at some sort of a beach in Miami somewhere, and they were talking about their congregations. And the first one says, my congregation is extremely progressive. Why? Because on Yom Kippur, we know that people get cranky and tired because of the fasting. So we don't do that. We provide everybody with a sandwich and something to nash on. And, and then so that, in case, they get hungry or angry or anything like that, they have food that they can eat. We don't make it a difficult experience. The second one says, that's nothing. He says, we have free Wi-Fi throughout the sanctuary and laptops for rent that people can take. So that if you get bored listening to the rabbi and you don't, and you want to do something, you can surf the web, you can go watch movies, you can play some games and stuff like that. It's we're going to try and make it a very enjoyable Yom Kippur experience. And the third one says, that's nothing. He says, we have a big sign in front of our congregation. It says, closed for the holidays. Okay. So Yom Kippur, to take Yom Kippur, but then the next part of Yom Kippur, the Parsha, starts talking immediately about something that's very different subject area, which talks about all the forbidden relationships. You can't marry your mother, you can't marry your father. Oh, so sad. And then you can't marry your sister. Well, you would want to marry your sister. I don't know who would want to marry their sister. And by the way, since we're on the subject, and let's not also talk about you can't marry an animal. You can't go, kick your favorite cow. You can't marry the cow. It's not allowed. You can't men can't marry men. Women can't marry women. Can't do and don't give over your children to these pagan idolaters of Moloch to pass between the fires, and so forth like that. That's a big no-no. And the commentators ask, and he says, it seems like it's a very different thing. How do you stick Yom Kippur together with this subject and so forth? And especially when you know that the prayers on Yom Kippur in the afternoon service, after everybody is very holy, they've had the evening service, they have the morning service, they had the Musaf service, and then you come along into the Mincha service where you're nearing the end, where you're getting really, really spiritual, you're really like an angel, and then the parsha of the Torah portion that they read is exactly these things. Don't fall in love with a cow. It's not a good idea. Not allowed. Can't marry them. Don't take them home. So they're actually it's not just a hodgepodge. Everything in Torah is specific, and this is trying to tell you that something very important about life, and that's what these talks are about. What do you mean by life? In life, sometimes we get very spiritual, we get very inspired, and we see very exciting things going on. And then all of a sudden, we see some certain thoughts that are going through your head, and they're completely not appropriate. And you think like you're a fake, you're an imposter. It's not real. You're not really that holy. You really aren't. You really haven't changed yourself. You really didn't go anywhere on it. And this is a big problem by people. They feel that that everything they do is not really honest, and that bothers them because we're dealing with God and you're communicating to God, and you feel like you're not really this is not who I am. So the Parsha is saying, no, 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 this is actually the whole thing. We are not supposed to be Mrs. Perfect and Mr. Perfect. We have different moods and different things come over us, and it's not entirely it's not so much our fault. It's how we respond to it. If we respond for depression, and if we respond to just throwing in our hands, that's the problem. But if we just happen to we go from one extreme to another, that's what life is all about. That's why the Kohen Gadol, when it says at the end of the service, what would happen with him? He would go home to his wife. After a whole day in the Holy of Holies in the temple, serving as a representative of the whole Jewish people, you would think he'd be a superstar. What is this going home and cleaning up the house and taking care of the kids and everything else? But that's what Judaism is all about. It's not about escaping from the world. It's about taking that holiness and bringing it into the world. So Achrei Mos is that message. The message is, it's the real test of whether you really had an experience is how you deal with the downers in life and the depressions in life and the other things in life. So that's the message of Achrei Mos, and it's connected to the next parsha. Then immediately we go with Kedoshim, which says you are holy people. You are holy people. Now, some people say, okay, what's that? They look at the Rashi and they say, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm very holy. And I'll use the Rashi and it'll prove it. It says, Kadoshim to you, holy, because why? Ki Kadosh Ani, because I am holy. What is that? One after the other. God is holy, I know. People are holy? Nah, I'm not so sure about it. So Rashi says, the Medrash continues and it says, no, don't think that you're whole Kadosha Kamoni. You can be holy like me, because my holiness is Mikadusha Sam, is from your holy, is higher than usually it's read as my holiness is on another order, is a different kind of holiness than yours, me than yours. I am holier than you. However, a little smidgen you can be, which is an encouraging idea that, don't get carried away. I start calling you holy, 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 holy Jew, holy person, holy great person. And you start taking it to your head, but you know what? You don't really have that. So don't worry, you have a spark of it, you have something of it. That's one way. But the Hasidic masters, specifically Rabbi Nachum of Chernobyl, and also the Moreh Naim, they both said, that's not really the depth of the idea that's being conveyed here. It's another idea, which is the following. You can read Hebrew in different ways, and this way is actually more on point than the normal way of reading it. God is saying, you can be holy. You can be holy, and you can be holy like I'm holy. How is that possible? Is that just flowery words? And the answer is no, because your holiness is from me. Your kedusha sam, your holiness is from me, meaning you are a part of me. So when people start calling themselves names, you can take the list and decide which one you sometimes call yourself. I'm depressed. I'm a failure. I'm an imposter. I'm an angry person. I'm too timid a person. I'm too critical of a person. I'm not a good mother. I'm not a good father. I'm not a good this. I'm not a good that. Whatever those things that you say to yourself, you know what you're doing. You're actually saying that about God. Because you're a part of God. And so you're saying God is also a bit of a failure. So he's saying, don't do that. Don't project your imperfections on God. At the core of who you are holy. Kadoshim, you are. You are a holy person. You are a holy person at your deepest core of who you are. And it's your response and your feeling that you are somehow not that is actually, that's what holds you back the most in life. If you could actually embrace your true core of who you are, then you would not be, just throwing in your hand or rushing through the davening or rushing through the mitzvahs or anything else like that. You are holy, and you are a holy person, and you have holiness inside of you because God, your core being is a piece of God, and if you are a piece of God, then you are capable of doing tremendous things. Now that might sound like flowery words, but then there was a grandson of the Chernobyl Rebbe who was called um, the Kotzker Rebbe, and the Kotzker Rebbe took this one step further. He said it's not only a the statement about who you are, it's also a game plan, a lesson, an instruction how you can become more holy. What is he saying? So the words that the Gemara uses is Talmud Lomar. Talmud Lomar ki ani kodesh. Literally it means the Talmud says, or the rabbis say that the God is holy. So you are holy, and the Talmud Lomar says that God is. The statement is that's how it says. Yeah, it says in the Talmud, God is holy. He says no, you're reading it wrong. Tilmud Lemar. The way to be able to transform yourself is to constantly say about yourself, I am holy because God is holy. I am a holy person. And if you say to yourself constantly, as I know one person does, says, I am a proud, strong, adult woman. Somebody says that all the time to herself. And you know what she says to me? She said, it actually makes her, transforms her. It makes her into something different. So here's the exercise for everybody in this class to do from going further. Whatever you want to do, whatever thing you say, you know what? At the core, you know who I am. I'm a piece of God. I'm a holy person. I'm a powerful person. God doesn't get depressed. God doesn't get silly. God doesn't get, doesn't have these moods and stuff like that. And therefore, say it about yourself that that's who you are too, because God is not that way. So you are not that way. And that was the class that I wanted to give, a short class, but hopefully a meaningful class. Okay. And then I'm going to turn it over to my wife.
Okay. Oh, now I'm not pinned anymore. I can't
Pin
unpin.
yourself.
I can't
If you
unpin
pin,
you.
if you pin yourself, then you'll pin
I'm
you.
double clicking on me and I can't pin it.
Don't double click. Just maybe right click on it and say pin or something like that.
Oh, I know. I'm going to right click on you and remove pin
Pin.
from you. Got
Okay.
it. Okay, good.
Okay.
So,
Zoom out now.
okay, good. So anyway, welcome. And tonight happens to be my mother's, today was, and these are the closing moments of my mother's 19th yahrzeit. And so this class is dedicated in her memory. And my mother was an extraordinarily sweet, strong, powerful, very diminutive Jewish woman. And she's a Holocaust survivor, an amazing person. So, so anyway, I want to talk a little bit about Mashiach, and I want to tell some very good stories. So this week, among the many different things I learn um, on a daily basis, is something called Sefer HaMitzvos, which is really the book of mitzvos. It's a list of all 613 mitzvos and what they're all about. And this week we happen to be learning the laws of kings. And the laws of kings are very relevant to Mashiach because we know that Mashiach is a king. And the longer title of Mashiach is Melech HaMelech or Melech HaMashiach. And Mashiach will be a king. So among the laws that I was reading, the first one was very interesting. It said that the whole purpose of a king is to bind the purpose of a Jewish king. A Jewish king, You should take out of your mind any secular images that you have about kings and pomp and circumstance. That's not a Jewish king. A Jewish king is a totally different thing. The main purpose of a Jewish king is to bind the Jewish people with their heavenly king, with God. And and uh, and it's very interesting. One law that's related to that is that you are not allowed to slight a Jewish king in any way, even something that is nobody else would consider a slight, but like a lack of attention or something like that. You're not, and the penalty for such a thing, I don't know if it was ever enacted, but the penalty for such a thing is death. It's a chayiv misa. It incurs the death penalty, or merits the death penalty. Let's put it that way. So why are Jewish kings so insecure, so fragile in their self-esteem that if somebody slights them, they have to kill them? No, it's the absolute opposite from that. The reason why it is Chayiv Misa, and again, I don't think it was ever enacted, but the reason why it's Chayiv Misa is that since the purpose of the king is to bind the Jewish people to their heavenly king, the king, has an essential bond with each Jew because he has to hook each Jew up to Hashem. And so when you do the slightest slight to the king, you are wounding yourself because he has an essential bond to you, and you're wounding yourself on the level of essence. And the natural result, if you wound yourself on the level of essence, the natural result is death. So next week, I'm going to tell two very powerful stories about what it means to be connected to somebody on the level of essence. So stay tuned. And so anyway, other interesting laws that I learned, the lowest function of a Jewish king, was to maintain law and order, both within the kingdom and in the face of enemies in the outside the kingdom. That's the lowest of the jobs of the king. Another job of the king is sort of as a role model. So he helps us. One of the hardest tasks for a Jew is to keep Hashem in mind. One of the hardest tasks for a Jew is we're so real to ourselves. The world is so real to us. And really, we're supposed to be, we're in this world on a mission from God, and we're supposed to be tied to God on a 24/7 basis because we're here not incidentally. We are here to do a mission of God, from God. We were sent from heaven for a specific mission. And if we're not in contact with the sender, we're not really doing our job. So so how does he connect us, besides for what I said earlier, that he has this natural bond with the Jew in a more down to earth way? When we see the king and his total nullification to God's goals, then it inspires us to be nullified to God's goals and to carry them out. So, for example, we know that God cares immeasurably. It's inconceivable how much God cares about every single Jew. And when we see that the king cares about every Jew across the surface of the earth, no matter how far away, no matter, if there's one Jew in Timbuktu, the king is intensely concerned and connected to that person. When we see something like that, when we see a person like that, it inspires us to be more connected to every other Jew. Even though on an essential, deep level, we are connected to every single Jew. Every Jew is intimately bound up with every other Jew, but the trick is bringing that intense bond that we have with other Jews to the surface, to an action level, so that we act that way. We're not just that way in essence, but we act like we are intensely tied to every other Jew. So and also, of course, the king is supposed to is a teacher. That's his highest role. And So I want to go from there to those are just some interesting laws I learned about a teacher, and I want to go from about Mashiach, who is a king. It's true of all kings, those laws that I mentioned. And I want to say that this week we going to what's happening now. This week we passed on Wednesday. It was the 28th of Nisan, and 32 years ago, the Rebbe, who, by the way, hinted many times that he's Mashiach, and hinted that and said that the grave will have no dominion over him. The Rebbe said on the 28th of Nisan, he announced that he has done 32 years ago, he has done everything in his power to bring Mashiach, and now he is turning over the job to us. And it is now our task. And people went bonkers after that speech, after that talk of the Rebbe. People went bonkers. They said, "What? What do you mean, Rebbe? What do you mean you've done everything you can? What do you mean we're doing it? If you can't do it, what do you mean we can do it?" And there is something that Mashiach cannot do. There is a very big thing that Mashiach cannot do. Mashiach, let's understand his name. Mashiach means anointed, means that he is selected by God for the job. But Melech HaMashiach means King Mashiach. Um, okay, I'm gonna say one more thing, and then I'll go back to that. So the Rebbe told us in the 28th of Nisan that it's up to us. The job of bringing Mashiach is up to us. 9 weeks earlier, he told us one of the most astounding things that the Rebbe, in my mind, one of the most astounding things that the Rebbe ever said. On Parshas Mishpatim in 1991, the Rebbe said, he said in Yiddish, he said, Der Minui von David Malka Mashiach is schon gewesen. And it means the appointment of Mashiach has already taken place. And the Rebbe said the only thing that is left is for the people to accept him, to accept his kingship. And then the bond between Mashiach and the people will grow, and between the people and Mashiach, the bond will grow until there's the proper level of them united as one. And then we'll see the full fruition of the era of Mashiach. So, so, uh, so anyway, as a side point, that's a blockbuster. I have to tell you that the Rebbe said Mashiach has already been appointed. It's not in the stratosphere anymore. Mashiach has already been appointed, and all the appointments of Jewish kings that I know, I'm sure I don't know about all of them, but the most famous ones, the appointment of the king by Hashem is almost is very often a completely private event. For example, Shaul, when Saul, the first Jewish king, was appointed, it was just between him and Hashem, and the Navi and the prophet. The Navi who anointed him. Hashem told the Navi to go anoint somebody. He did it, and he did it, and Shaul went back home, and his father said, "What happened today? Anything happened? Anything interesting?" He said, "No, not really." It was totally, nobody knew about it. For a while, nobody knew that he is the king. The same thing with David, King David. When he was appointed king, the prophet was told to go to the family of Yishai, and Hashem said, "I'll tell you which one to appoint." And when David was appointed as the next king of Israel, it was a private thing. Only he and his family knew. And after that, people continued, nobody knew. So people continued to mistreat David. They continued to say nasty things about him because they had no clue that this was Hashem's anointed one, the one who was anointed to be the king of Israel. So when the Rebbe says the appointment of Mashiach has already happened, and Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, when he was appointed to save the Jewish people, it was a totally private event. It was just him, God, and the burning bush. So the Rebbe wanted to tell us this private event has already happened. And I heard from a rabbi, Rabbi Tzvi Hamnick, that once the appointment of Mashiach happens, it is a done deal. It's unstoppable. It cannot be derailed. It's not like, oh, it almost happened and now it's not happening. No, it cannot be derailed. So it cannot be derailed. So so anyway, um so we know that Mashiach was already appointed. And uh so what should we do with that information? What should we do with the information? The Rebbe told us the Mashiach has already been appointed. That stuff has already happened. And all that's left is for us to accept him, to accept Mashiach as Mashiach. So, and why did the Rebbe say that? So I was saying, if you take the two parts of the name of Melech HaMashiach, Mashiach is something to anoint the king. That's something that's totally Hashem's business. Hashem picks who he wants. But Melech, the idea of Melech means that he's a king. And that Hashem cannot do. That is one thing that Hashem cannot do. Only the Jewish people can make a king a king. Unless the Jewish people accept Mashiach as their king, he is not, we make him Melech HaMashiach. We are without our ratification, it doesn't happen. So that's why there's a bunch of people in Crown Heights who are busy gaining signatures for the Rebbe as Mashiach, because the Rebbe told us that that the appointment has already happened, and that and he hinted broadly that it's him, and he told us that the grave has no effect on such things. So, so anyway, I want to tell you a couple stories. Can we trust the Rebbe? That's the main point. Can we trust the Rebbe? Does the Rebbe make mistakes? I mean, could he have made a mistake when he said that Mashiach is already appointed? Does the Rebbe make a mistake? Do things that come out of his mouth not happen? So, so anyway, I'll tell you two very brief stories. One of them I'm going to show you. God willing, the technology works. The first story is about Professor Herman Branover. It's not the Professor Herman Branover story that I usually tell. It's a different one. So we know Herman Branover was one of the most famous, he's still alive, thank God, and he was one of the most famous refuseniks. And for 50, he was a famous scientist in Russia. He was an expert in the field of magnetohydrodynamics. And when he tried to get out of Russia, when he applied to emigrate, that was the end of his career. He had to sell clothes for a living after that. And miraculously, he got out. And he got out in 1972. And he had been in touch with the Rebbe for many years already. The Rebbe had encouraged him, told him not to give up, not to get depressed. Anyway, so he got out, and one of the first he emigrated to Israel. One of the first things he did was to come to Crown Heights and to see the Rebbe. He flew to America. He went to Crown Heights. He saw the Rebbe, and and in part of that meeting, the Rebbe said to him, "And where will you be going tomorrow?" And he said, "I'm going to Philadelphia because I'm going to talk to some students there." And the Rebbe said, "When you're in Philadelphia, be sure to look up the person in your field." Now, Herman Branover had a lot of respect for the Rebbe, but he didn't know the Rebbe very well back then. And so he figured to himself, the Rebbe's making a mistake. I know everybody in my field, and I know where they are. And there is nobody in my field in Philadelphia. He's saying to himself, I'm absolutely sure there's nobody in my field. The Rebbe's making a mistake. But he was enough of a chassid to not contradict the Rebbe. He just smiled, and he went off to Philadelphia. When he was that first day that he was in Philadelphia, the shaliach, the Chabad emissary down there, met him, and they were talking. And Professor Branover told him about the Rebbe's comment and said that. And so the shaliach said, "Oh, we got to find him. We got to find the person in your field." And Professor Branover said, "Rebbe's making a mistake. There's nobody in my field in Philadelphia." And the shaliach said, "You don't understand. You don't understand. If the Rebbe said it, it is not a mistake. We have to search for him." And this was back in the early 1970s. It was 20 years before the internet would be up and running. More than 20 years before the internet would be up and running. You couldn't just type in magnetohydrodynamics and come up with a search engine. There was no such thing. And for some reason, the universities themselves, there were two giant universities in Philadelphia, Temple University and University of Pennsylvania. He and the Shliach ended up going in the faculty buildings and going door to door in these giant universities. They were going at it for 5 or 6 hours. Brandenburg was starving and thirsty. They didn't stop to eat or drink. The shlich was so certain. If the Rebbe said it, the Rebbe does not make mistakes. Finally, after 5 or 6 hours, they saw somebody in a hallway and they said, "Do you know anybody in magnetohydrodynamics?" And the guy said, "Yeah, try that door over there." And so they knocked on a door, and an Asian professor came out, and they said, "Do you know anybody in magnetohydrodynamics?" He said, "Yes, I'm in that field." And so he invited Branover into his office. They spoke for an hour. The guy was so impressed with Branover that he said, there's a scientific conference in 6 weeks in Palo Alto. You have to go to it. I'm going to put you on the roster of speakers. You're amazing. And Branover said, no, you don't understand. My ticket to Israel, my ticket home is a long time before then. I can't stay that long, but thank you anyway. Anyway, after Philadelphia, he flew back to New York to speak to the Rebbe again, and the Rebbe asked him what happened in Philadelphia. He told him all about it. He told about the professor's invitation to him, and the Rebbe said, "You have to go. You must go." And so Brandenburg had a new level of respect for the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, "I'm going." And so he went there. He went to Palo Alto. He was registered for the conference to speak. And the US Navy had tracked him down. They found out that he was going to be at this conference. That's how they tracked him down. They flew out there and they met with him and they said, "We want you to set up a lab in magnetohydrodynamics for us, the US Navy. You can do it wherever you are, and we're going to pay for it." And so, with the full backing of the US Navy, Branover got his dream come true. He set up his own laboratory I believe he's in the Negev in a university in Israel, the largest laboratory of magnetohydrodynamics in the world, because he followed because the shliach knew that if the Rebbe says something, he doesn't make a mistake. Now I'm going to try and I'm going to share my screen, and there's a 4-minute story. If I can't get it on a video, then I'll tell you the story myself. But how much better if you can actually see it. Maybe I have to pull it up first. Wait a minute. No, I don't think you're going to be able to see it like this. Just a minute. I'll make it small. And how can I do this? No, I think I have to open it up.
Yisrael Swimmer is a chief financial officer living in Lawrence, New York.
Just a minute.
In the 1980s, he was a child growing up in Johannesburg,
No, it's
South
not going to
Africa.
work. Just a minute. I'm going to stop this.
Pigmentosa.
Your tech support is here.
What?
The retina.
Your tech support is over here, not
Okay, yes, Shimon, it's not. I want to stop this.
Your eyesight.
Didn't you do share?
I did.
P for short.
Just a minute.
Unfortunately, even till today, there's no cure for RP.
Oh, yeah.
I think the statistics.
Just a minute. How do I stop this guy?
If you get RP when you are an adult or like in your.
I know.
Is a chief financial officer.
Okay, stop.
Living
No,
in
okay.
Lawrence, New York.
1 minute.
In the
Just a second. Now I'm going to make this smaller. And now I want to make it smaller. Why won't it be smaller? Small yourself. Okay, just a second. Shem, please help me. Okay, now, and let's make that small. And now I'm going to share my screen. Here, just a second. Share screen. Now let's see if it pops up. Here. Okay, I'm going to do this one. Thank God. I think it's going to work. And share. No, you're not seeing anything, right?
I am.
What are you seeing? Nothing.
I'm seeing your browser.
Yeah. My fault. 1 minute.
I'm seeing YouTube. So if you hit, if you put
Can
it
you
in
see this
center,
guy yet?
I see a guy.
Okay, good. And is he big enough to see?
It's sort of down on the bottom screen. Now it's better. Yeah, that's better.
Okay,
That's
good.
good. Okay,
Here we
that's
go.
good. Go.
So this guy, his name is Yisroel Shlomo Swimmer, and he's good. And I'm going to start his story from the beginning. And here we go. Tell me if you can hear it.
Yisrael Swimmer is a chief financial officer living in
Yeah.
Lawrence, New York. In the 1980s, he was a child growing up in Johannesburg, South Africa.
I was diagnosed with a disease called retinitis pigmentosa. Retinitis pigmentosa is a degenerative disease of the retina. So at the back of your eye, the retina grows over the back of your eye and blocks out your eyesight. It's called RP. Unfortunately, even till today, there's no cure for RP. I think the statistics are if you get RP when you are an adult or like in your later years, 60, 70, you'll lose 90% of your eyesight. If you get it as a child or young adult, you'll lose 100% of your eyesight. So at that point in time, the doctor suggested, there was not much that they could do. So they suggested that I start wearing sunglasses because the sun could speed up the whole process. My uncle, Dr. Rodney, who was a phenomenal man, said to my parents at the time, the doctors haven't given us much hope, so I'm going to take Israel to see the Rebbe. So we decided, or he decided, and my parents decided to come Hoshana Rabbah during Sukkot. We left South Africa. We came with about a group of 10 to 15 people from South Africa. We came straight from the airport, went into line for lekach. Hoshana Rabbah, the Rebbe would stand outside the sukkah and give out lekach to everybody
Honey
that passed
cake.
by. Obviously, lekach being symbolic of having a sweet new year. Anyway, we got in line. I was standing next to my uncle.
That's him.
My uncle said to the Rebbe, "This is Yisrael Shlomo Swimmer from South Africa." And without saying anything further, the Rebbe handed me a piece of lekach. And he said to me in English, "May the Almighty grant you that you should learn Torah with open eyes." I just remember the extreme excitement and happiness and farbringing because we had gotten a bracha from the Rebbe. And as far as everyone was concerned, there was nothing to worry about, and I was going to be 100% fine. So what my uncle had arranged prior to the trip to New York was he had set up various visits to doctors in Manhattan. He wanted other doctors to validate the diagnosis and obviously look to see if there was a problem. And he had brought all the tests from South Africa, and I went through a couple of hours of testing. Tuesday morning, so that was Monday, Tuesday morning, my uncle said to me that I'm going to say a pasuk at the children's rally in 770.
Okay, Vishinantam will now be recited by Yisrael Shlomo Swimmer from Sandtown, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Vishinantam, Levanecha, Veribata.
At the end of the rally, I went to the back of 770 as my uncle had instructed and said that he was waiting for me. And when I got to the back of 770, he said to me that he just called the doctors, and the doctors said to him that it's impossible that it's the same child that had the previous testing done because there's absolutely no sign of anything at the back of his eyes. So obviously there was that simcha, went back to South Africa, went back to the original doctors, and there was nothing to be seen.
Okay. So stop share. The point of that story, the point of the Branover story is that
I remember the night when he went to the hospital.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. How do I get
my
rid
son
of it?
came to the house
Oh, yeah.
and took him on a wheelchair.
Just a second.
I still remember actually waving
Okay.
goodbye to him.
You know, you guys, I'm going to turn off Zoom. Thank you so much for coming. The purpose.
And he was actually able to stand up
Here.
for a few minutes. And he danced like he
This is
was
not the right
walking around in the circle.
Here.
So he wanted.
Okay, good. So, so the purpose of sharing those two stories, the Branover story and the Yisrael swimmer story, is that when the Rebbe says something, you can take it to the bank. If the Rebbe said Mashiach has already been appointed, and we know that once we have the appointment of Mashiach, it's a done deal. It's like a bowling ball going down an alley. It doesn't turn around. Then we can count on the Rebbe's words. And we're living in a very exciting time. So I want to thank everybody for coming. And I want to wish you a very good week. And my mother should have a big aliyah of her neshama. And I'm going to turn off the recording. If anybody has any questions, they can stay on and ask their questions.